Hello, everybody. Hi. So I'm Nathan, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about failure. I'd like to start the way I start most of my classes when we're introducing a new term, looking at the etymology. The word failure comes from the Latin word fallere, which means to deceive or to lie. That's also the same Latin word that false is derived from. And that's because to accept a failure is really to deceive yourself. You're telling yourself that you have failed. You're telling yourself that you have not succeeded. And today, through the course of my speech, I hope to outline some of the ways in which failure is not a setback, failure is not the absence of success, failure is an integral stepping stone on the path to success. So, one of the first examples I'd like to look at is my brief foray into the fields of Taekwondo. When I was 11 years old, after much persuasion and begging, I managed to convince my parents to sign me up for a Taekwondo class. I was instantly enamored. I was someone who never had any attraction for any physical sport. I never liked football or cricket, but something about being able to kick and punch objects was immensely satisfying, and I devoted myself entirely to this sport. When I was 12 years old, there was a district-level Taekwondo competition happening in Bangalore. I signed up for it, and I went for the competition. Now, for competitions at that age level, they didn't segregate us by weight. They segregated us by age, and I was 12 years old. So I got put in the 12 and under age category. So I was the oldest, the biggest, the baddest in my entire category. I plowed through the opposition with ease. I unleashed a maelstrom of kicks and moves and teeps and swinging axe kicks, and I plowed my way through the opposition. Like some legendary minotaur of old, I plowed through the opposition, encountering no significant resistance, and I emerged victorious on the other side. I was convinced in my abilities. No one could defeat me, I thought. I was the Bruce Lee of Bomanahalli, the Jackie Chan of Jakasandra, and there was nothing that would prevent me from maxing out my stats in this field. 1 year later came, and because I had got a silver medal in district level, I was now eligible to be in the state level championships. By this time, however, I had turned 13. So as karma would have it, I was then put in the under 18 age category. And I was the smallest out of all my competitors. Still, I was undaunted. I was in the van going there with my coach. I was still completely confident that victory would be mine. And I asked my coach, knowing the answer, I said, "Do you think we'll be able to win this?" And the coach looked at me and he laughed. He said, "There is no way you're winning this. You take classes twice a week in your cozy apartment complex. There's students that are running up hills. They're practicing 6-7 days a week. They live for this. They breathe Taekwondo. You're just visiting." And I thought he was being very unsupportive. I thought this is not what my coach should be telling me. So I went to the competition and I got absolutely annihilated. First fight itself, I got beaten very badly. The judges decided I had lost, and my parents drove me home. So this was an example of failure, but I thought this failure was essential. It was essential because it provided me with a reality check. It gave me an accurate idea of where I stood. Okay, it showed me that I wasn't this undisputed titan in the field, and that there was in fact a long way that I needed to go if I wanted to reach that level of expertise. So the next example is also related. I was homeschooled. So I was actually homeschooled all the way up until 9th grade. This is a picture of me with my classmates and my brothers. And I had the same classmates all the way from grade 1 till grade 9. It was a very nice environment where I got a lot of teacher support. I got to interact with my peers. But it also presented a lot of challenges, especially when 9th grade came and I had to segue to the public school education system. So I was used to being at home with these 5 classmates, and then suddenly I was thrown into a IGCSE board in 8th grade. I had 35 classmates. I wasn't able to effectively communicate with them, and I experienced a lot of failures at that stage. One of the failures that I faced was academic failure. In my homeschooling, there was a lot of emphasis placed on history and English and speaking, not a lot of emphasis put on math. My understanding of math was that it involved numbers and combining them. So I could do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division by 8th grade. So I thought I had mastered math. What else is there to do? On my first day in public school, I realized that all the other students had started incorporating letters in their math. Algebra was now a thing, powers were there, exponentials, and I was very overwhelmed. I clearly remember that in 8th grade, there was one math test I sat for that I got 0 out of 30 in. I didn't leave it blank. I attempted every single question, and I got 0 out of 30. I clearly remember what it was on as well. It was a trigonometry test. That was a wake-up call for me. It was a wake-up call for my parents, and I got sent for math tuitions after that. I remained in those math tuitions through 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. But I ended up getting an A star in 10th grade. I got an A star in my 12th grade A-levels as well, both in mathematics. And that was only possible because of the harsh failure that 0 on 30 had. So sometimes failure can act as a wake-up call, and it can help you realize the steps that you need to take to reach the level of expertise that you want. Another difficulty that I faced coming from my homeschooling background was that I was not particularly fluent in any Indian language. I'm still not. I was brought up speaking and studying in English, and I still predominantly speak English. I faced a lot of failures as a result of this. Simple failures. Failures to effectively communicate with an auto driver and tell him where you want to go. Failure to get a fair rate from the guy in the market who hears your accent and the price of Oreos goes from 20 rupees to 40 rupees. So constantly experiencing those difficulties. And there was one specific incident I remember where I was in college and I was sitting in the front row of the class, as good students ought to do. And as I was sitting there, some students in the back were making noise. So the teacher told them, come sit in the front. And there wasn't enough room in the front, so I had to go back. So the teacher then turned to me and said, Nathan, go back. And one student thought it would be very clever to then start chanting, Simon, go back. Okay, so then the whole class caught on and the whole class was like, Simon, go back. And then Nathan got up very sadly and I went and sat in the back of the class. Okay, some might see that as a failure to integrate properly. Okay, but I put my foot down. I started trying to learn a little bit of Hindi. It's very bad. Lekin ye Simon wapas nahi jayega. Ye Simon hamesha idhar rahega. So that failure spurred me on to, if not a success, at least an effort to integrating more and being more conversant in the vernacular and local languages. I'm now able to travel across India, and I've gone on several solo adventures across India using my mustache and my little bit of Hindi knowledge to get through situations. And I feel that was only possible because of the failures that I experienced earlier on. The next example I'd like to give is to do with one of my favorite hobbies. It's cycling. Now, as many of you know, I'm super into cycling, and I've cycled several long-distance journeys before. Now, I didn't start like that. For a long time, my friend Vibhav and I, we had a dream of going on a long-distance cycle ride. So our first attempt was we tried cycling to this place in Tamil Nadu called Palakkod. It's about 100 kilometers from Bangalore. And we managed to cycle there. Thanks. So we managed to cycle there. This was the plan. We cycled all the way from Bangalore to Palakkod at the bottom. And then our plan on day 2 was to go to Denkani Kotai and back to Bangalore. Seems like a good plan. On day 1, everything went smoothly. We covered 100 kilometers on the first day, pasting down the highway, no difficulties at all, predominantly downhill as well. But then on the next day, even though we had scheduled only 40 kilometers to do that day, we ended up realizing the terrain that it took us through was through a ghat section. So even though it was a small amount, it involved cycling up steep roads that were winding. There were a lot of hairpin turns, and we were absolutely exhausted. We barely made it 40 kilometers before we gave up. We loaded our bikes onto a bus. We put them on the roof. We paid 200 rupees and got taken back to Bangalore. So when I was telling my friends and family about this, they heard about this expedition and they said, failure. This is not what you set out to do. You set out to do a nice cycle trip, you gave up halfway and came back on a bus. But I refused to look at it that way. I refused to see it as a failure. As one of our earlier speakers said, the oft quoted line by by Edison, in which he said, I didn't fail 999 times, I found 999 ways that it doesn't work. So through this experience, I was able to figure out what needed to be done. We needed to plan our routes better. We needed to account for the elevation, for the altitude. We needed to plan what times of the day we were going to cycle in. So I took all of that data and we incorporated that. And in our second cycling attempt, we managed to cycle from Bangalore to Chennai. We have the entire route laid out here. Over 4 days, we cycled to Chennai. And I feel this was only made possible because of the experiences given to us by our first failure. We planned, we strategized, we applied ourselves, and we used the information that we had gained from our previous adventure, right? So failures is not the end of the road, it's a stepping stone on the path to success. And that down there is me and my friend Vibhav with the Bay of Bengal in the background after having cycled to Chennai. My final example is from the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I was a math teacher, and as a math teacher to grades 11 and 12, it was very difficult during the pandemic because I couldn't do classes verbally. I had to experiment with finding ways to write mathematical expressions and have the students see them. Originally, I tried balancing a whiteboard on a chair in front of the camera and writing the equations on it. When that didn't work, I experimented with holding a phone over a notebook and writing the math in that. Both of these were very jugaad and unprofessional solutions. I felt I could do better. I looked for a way, and I found this software called LaTeX. So LaTeX is a mathematical typesetting software, and it's what mathematicians and science researchers use when they're writing formal papers. It allows you to represent all this mathematical notation. You can see the fractions and the trigonometric equations over there, and you basically write that code, and this in real time turns it into the expression. So I experimented with this, and during the pandemic, I would take classes with students, and I would be able to type the math and have it appear there. And I felt the only reason I was able to get the skill or learn the skill was because of the failures, because of how badly it didn't work for me to be writing on a whiteboard or writing in a notebook. So the failure spurred me on to discovering this alternative. So this is an example of how failure can encourage us to develop innovations and to find unique workarounds. So in conclusion, failure can give us information about all of these different things. It can give us a reality check. It can tell us where we actually stand. It can give us information about what doesn't work and what needs to be done better. It can also help us innovate and find unique and different ways to do things. I'd like to also give one line here. Don't let failure set you back. Okay? You can experience a setback, but that doesn't need to set you back. And there may be an I in failure, but there is also a you in failure. And that's because you decide whether or not something is a failure. At the end of the day, regardless of what society tells you, regardless of whether society deems your expedition a success or a failure, you're the one who gets to make the final judgment. You can tell yourself this was not a failure, this was a step on the path to success. So you must not let failure define you. You can define failure. You can say this wasn't a failure, this was a success. And you need to remember, despite what opposition you encounter, no matter how many failures you encounter on your path, you've got to keep striving. You've got to keep going forward. In the words of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, it's about drive. It's about power. We stay hungry. We devour. So stay hungry, keep working, and realize your goals. Don't let failure stop you. Thank you.